Chapter 31. Don't be a worthless scum. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Master, is something wrong? Absalom's inquiry broke him out of his chain of thoughts. No, it is nothing. But I don't think he is weak if he can dodge you. And I am impressed that you managed to increase your speed. Volmak said, patting Absalom's red hair. The young boy's countenance suddenly fell, expressing his dissatisfaction. What is wrong? Volmak, seeing this, asked. It is hard. I can't even go to the main palace because of my half-brothers. They think I'm too weak to be a demon. Even a lesser demon would defeat me effortlessly. I can't visit mother's family and my half-brothers there too because I am not a pure vampire. I have nowhere to go except here. How were you able to do it? You are accepted and respected by even archdemons like Shax. He asked, raising his head to the old man. Wraith stayed mute all through but paid close attention to this part. As a young boy, I have always loved the sword and martial arts. It was a unique art that I couldn't take my mind off after witnessing it being used by a human from another world. Because of it I strayed away and followed this human till he taught me all he knew. I trained and trained till I was strong, but when I came back to Felfium, I was considered a traitor and a castaway. I wasn't welcomed, but I knew the rule, only the strong could rule, so I began to challenge the lords of different fiefdoms, whether they were demons, Obrinths, Tannas, Ugals, my fellow Actzi, Lamers, and even other lower fiends. I challenged all of them and beat them up. Still the archdemons couldn't ignore me any longer. Then I beat 2 archdemons. But then was beaten to a pulp by your father. Wow, I guess he is that strong, huh? Then I too shall. No, Lord Absalom, you won't challenge anyone. When I did that I was young, arrogant, and reckless. I had no one to guard me through the right path. You don't have to be like me. There are several other ways to be acknowledged. Volmak chastised him with a smile and looked at his door. Lord Absalom, take the young man along with you, get wood, and build me a new door. I hope you two get along. A delicious dinner will be waiting for you when you get back with my door. Why? Why him? Absalom cried out, scratching his face in despair at being paired up with a human. He stood up anyway and Wraith followed him. Before he proceeded further, Volmak stopped him, placing his hand on his shoulder. Lord Absalom had a rough childhood, so he might have a very grumpy attitude, but he is a demon of goodwill. I think he will make a good friend. The sound of the word friend made Wraith's ear leap, but also tingled his chest that the lurking of a recent backstabbing scared the idea of making a new friend. He hadn't made any friends before. Male turned out to not be a friend after all. What if he betrays me in the end? Wraith lowered his face. He had never known before now that he finds it difficult to heal from emotional hurt. He looked forward to the whitish-skinned and tall figure as he walked proudly into the plain wilderness. He looked back at Volmak and nodded. I'll try. Then he ran along and met up with Absalom afterward. Volmak looked at the two with a smile on his face, looking so fulfilled. The two had spent 30 minutes and had still not left the plains. What was more annoying was that Absalom did not answer no matter how many times Wraith asked how long it will take for them to reach where they can find woods. The young man just kept marching along. Wraith finally could not tolerate it anymore. He grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. Don't be a worthless scum. Are you deaf? I said, how long will it take for us to reach the woods? You cockroach, how dare you touch me? Absalom stared down at Wraith with his nose in the air and his eyeballs sinking downwards his eyes as he spoke with an intimidating growl that made Wraith reluctantly release his collar. He adjusted his tunic and looked at Wraith. I will spare your life because Volmak deems it so. Don't you dare think about talking to me, you insignificant cockroach. He said and walked on. Forgive me, old man Volmak, I don't think I want to be friends with this guy at all. Wraith sighed and followed from behind, a little embarrassed. After a while, they were amidst towering trees with few leaves. Wraith was lost in thought and didn't know when they even got there. His feet were beginning to hurt from the long walk of hours, yet Absalom looked fine. He restrained showing any signs of tiredness for that fact. He already considers me inferior, I will not show any signs of weakness. Wraith had forgotten he was competing with a fiend who was born from a vampire and a demon father, and not just any demon but one of the highest echelon. Absalom paid no attention to Wraith and did almost all the work himself, such as pushing down a tree with his arms, and cutting the trees with his fingers, while Wraith looked for what could be used to improvise an axe or a chainsaw. He was utterly useless even if he wanted to help. It seems that no matter what I do, I am completely useless compared to a fiend. He pushed that tall tree down on his own. The trees were extremely tall, ranging between 20 feet and 24 feet, although it was a thin wood. What astonished Wraith more was the durability and accuracy of his nails as struck them into the woods and tore down a linear line. It was like a very sharp razor. As he stood beside one tree, watching the young vampire work alone, Wraith was made to instincts remember the punch he almost received a while ago. Would I have died if he punched me? Just one punch. Chapter 32 The Disaster is Coming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Volmac did the final touching of the repair, which was just fusing the door to its frame. Afterward, he moved a long wooden table from behind the cabin as well as 3 chairs and began to set the tables. The dishes were unlike anything Wraith has ever seen, but still, the smell of the meat felt so familiar even though they didn't look it. The cooked aberrant oyster soup was black, but the oysters in the soup were blue. In particular, if the food was judged by appearance, then it will be tagged as poison, but the sweetening aroma that stuffed Wraith's lungs as he stared down at the ominous-looking food made his throat long for some feel of it. He wanted to suck the oyster dry. The soup was not the only delicacy he had to deal with. What about the Echidron bread and griffin jam, a special kind of jelly that is created from the milk of griffin and the red bunyip plant? The bread was rounded with the jam sitting in between it like its belly button, and there were several of it on the table. Ah, it's my favorite. Wraith looked up and saw the arrogant vampire dip the bread into the soup. He then sloppily slipped it into his mouth. He brought out the oyster, and put it into his mouth, munching on everything in one go. Wraith gulped with drool and looked down at his. Lord Absalom, you should stop eating like that. And you too should try it. I'm sure it looks different from the food you are used to, but it might even beat yours. Gulp. Wraith had long succumbed to the temptation of the food, he just was being skeptical. With Volmac's encouragement, he did the same thing Absalom did and slipped the bread into his mouth, but not sloppily like Absalom. He was accurate and precise, making sure there were no droppings. His eyes widened immediately. The bread and jam began to melt into the soup as he grind them with his teeth. The entire flavor scattered in his mouth and filled his taste buds with a new kind of delicious heaven. Why the hell is this damn human copying me? Absalom glared at Wraith, who paid him no attention and was super consumed in the space between the soup and his mouth. Volmac chuckled as he watched Wraith enjoy the food so much and smiled as he looked at Absalom too. You've suffered, I hope with the help of this one variable you will be able to enjoy the goodness that living gives us. A lot is about to change. I wonder how Felfium will take it. He too began to slowly dig, but unlike the two, he tore the bread bit by bit and sipped the soup after eating the bread. There was no setting of the sun, but the dawning of the night and the multicolored stars caused a beauty and radiant golden glow to seep out of the horizon and painted the entire place with the love of memories. The Rigeria country. Rigeria was one of the many countries that were built around the belief of the 8 archons, to be particularly the archon of nature, one that granted elemental skills and perks. Heroes who were chosen by the archon of nature would often gain skills that were related to the nature around them: lightning, earth, wood manipulation, water bending, and fire management. There was diverse use to the skills, but one of its important uses is its usefulness in dungeon raids as support for the raid team. Heroes are protagonists and as such do not always want to take the backstage, especially when they are well fitted for the main stage, unless they have no choice or because there is a stronger hero in the party. Even if they take the backstage, the type of attack pattern that was rampant was damage dealing and tankers, who were otherwise known as defenders. There was no use for those kinds of attack pattern for supporters, as such only heroes of the nature archon could do the job very well, but to add salt to the wound, they were scarce. And were like a rare gem. The media and several police wagons roughly parked around a red swirling portal that stood in the middle of the road, with their armed weapons as the gate released sparks. The next moment several people could be seen coming out of the gate with injuries all over their bodies, some had even lost a part of their limbs while some were carried on stretchers, and some were bandaged. The reporters swarmed forward as a certain man with russet-brown, surfer hair and full beards of the same color came out of the portal. The armor he wore above his black and white casual wear was stained with purple blood and a clawed mark was engraved on his pauldron. Hero Petus Andregant, what do you have to say to the citizen of Nigeria who has trusted their safety into the hands of the Blueslian Guild? The lady said, pointing a fancy and slim mic to the man's gut. He paused and lowered his eyelids, but not completely, but for that brief moment, expressing a degree of sadness that gripped the heart of the people that watched him on the news from their respective houses and even internationally. I deeply apologize for this great disappointment. As the guild master of the Blueslian Guild, I take full responsibility for this loss. We prepared without might after we heard of how even the association and several other guilds were not able to clear this dungeon. He gritted his teeth. That I was sure that we would be able to do it, but these monsters are unlike everything that we have ever seen, with no hero to entrust our backs, so we were swarmed and killed from behind. We stood no chance before the monster boss whose movement we couldn't even see as he slayed our men. I believe the association has urged us before and I will say it again. We need more heroes than ever before. Especially heroes of the nature archon. Please, we know you have been insulted and laughed at before because of your abilities, but these are the times that call for a reunion of purpose. Leave aside your grudges and let us protect our nation together. Once again, I apologize for the disappointment. I have lost a lot of my people inside there, but it is not an excuse. I'm just asking for understanding and forgiveness from the citizen of this great country. He said with one more bow in front of the woman. He and several other heroes walked away while the injured were taken away in ambulances. The reporters swarmed them regardless but were kept at bay by the police. Trash. Trash. Would you look at that guy, his acting skills just get better by the day. A certain man with a tank top said as he sat in a beach resort parlor watching the news. On his right arm was a thorn of roses tattoo that streamed down to his wrist. How can you know for sure that he is lying? A man donned in a wine-colored suit and black inner shirt with fancy shades and a toothpick in his mouth responded, crossing one leg over the other as he smirked at the man sitting beside him who had just talked. Ah, see. I have worked with him for a bit. That bastard sees no use for humans other than them being a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. He responded, flipping his side-parted two-block hair. The greenness of his hair glimmered under the radiance of the beach sun, along with his playboy face that housed a small dot right beside his mouth and his flawless bright skin that was like the color of the sun itself. He would make any woman reach orgasm with just a wink. But the suited man seating beside him wasn't bad either, only that his face was more casual looking but stood out with his brown skin and black slick back hair. Does it matter now? You too, Thaw Sonata, have climbed so many people to reach where you are today. Or are you just carrying a little grudge because Petus has looked down on you for being just a regular fire dude? The dark-skinned guy stated, leaning back and spreading his arms over the couch with a chuckle. You sure know how to tickle my anger spots, Virgo boy. I'll take that as a compliment. What are you going to do now? The strongest guild in Rigera failed to clear a level 10 difficulty dungeon. They would start to look outside for help, and other countries too are busy solving their business since this is a worldwide issue. Yes, you are right. It has just been a month since level 10 dungeons appeared in different places all over the world, but the nations have suffered so much damage around them. It is about time for me and my guild of support-based youngsters to monetize our existence. Thaw Sonata, a level S hero of the Nature Archon, grinned as he enjoyed how the situation of this disaster was playing out for his good. Following the disaster in Nigeria, Epsilon City, which was where the level 10 dungeon appeared, was issued an emergency evacuation, every citizen that valued his or her life was told to leave the city because once a dungeon stays too long uncleared, the monsters inside begin to break out. But this phenomenon was not something that happened in Nigeria alone. Few other countries suffered the same appearance of level 10 dungeons, although some of that few were able to clear the dungeons such as Pulmei Empire and Shining City Nation. Chapter 33 Bravery is the Path to Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You will restart the second death trial, what the fuck? Wraith opened his eyes to a familiar scenery as he had just closed them absent-mindedly after the fulfilling meal. Ah no! He cried out, gripping his head and sinking to his knee. He had forgotten to avoid sleeping thanks to the belly-washing meal had. He absolutely forgot that the abyss would come for him any time he dares to see sleep and has not passed the trial. He looked up at the clear skies. The skies were still dark as usual but this time ridden of clouds, and what lay beneath him was clear. There was a change in the atmosphere. Before it is cold but right now was sweating profusely and slowly turned back to see where the hot air blowing on his back was coming from. He fluttered backward as he saw the rumbling and squirming of the blazing lava that slowly rose in between the mountain. Slowly and slowly with gladness rose to the mountain level. Meanwhile, Volmac stood frozen as the same thing that had happened before repeated itself. But this time it was stronger than before. Before he was the one that willingly kneeled to the abyss. He was cleaning up the table outside while Wraith staggered inside and fell to the bed to sleep, and moments later the demonic and ominous presence returned, stronger than it was before. Before it was a little smoke, but this time a horde of darkness swiveled around the corner where his bed is supposed to be. Its ubiety screaming into his senses and forcing him to a state of total submission both in body and in mind. His heavy knees slammed against the ground, smashing into it. Volmac supported himself from a total fall with his hands, but even his hands shivered as they held him up in resistance to this unknown force. His mind went numb, seeming like he could find 1,000 ways to escape this situation but not venturing into one. It's a good thing Lord Absalom left. Wraith didn't need an explanation of what a volcano means. Yes, he was on top of a volcano right now and it was still the same trial. Survive the fall. He glared at the volcano's blazing lava that illuminated a reflection of the fire on his face and continued to swell. What am I going to do? His mind beckoned him. Wraith couldn't climb down the mountain. The volcano would erupt and catch up to him before he reaches halfway, plus climbing down the mountain wasn't the way to pass the test. He needed to jump knowing that he would die if he should. Or should I climb down and enjoy a few more meals with old man Volmac before finally coming back here to die? He gritted his teeth and faced the edge of the volcano mountain. Looking down, the base of the mountain was so far that it couldn't be seen. It's definitely taller than before. The mountain continued to grow in your absence. What? Even in my absence? Wraith was void of words to describe this evil nature. Telling me to die right off the bat. Does the abyss have some plan for me, or it wants to use my dead body to come back to life? Old man Volmac did mention that the abyss can be in a person's body. Am I just a pawn for its plan? Wraith wondered aloud as he stared down at the mountain base. Then unwanted memories of the horrible 3 years he spent at home after becoming a hero surged into his brain, breeding a long-forgotten grudge and rage right from inside his belly. His brows furrowed together as the pearl of tear that gathered beneath his eyes was carried away by the hot wind of the volcano that blew from the back, warning Wraith of the danger ahead. I have come so far, I can't back down now, he said as he stared down the mountain. And I won't let you command me around with your measly trials. If you need me, then you better begin to respect my desires. Wraith said with a face of bravery that matched his face. The bangs of his hair fluttered in the wind as he turned to the volcano, glaring at it with determined eyes that were ready and set for their death. Bye-bye bitch. He gallantly walked and jumped into the volcano, diving deep down into it. You have activated Dust Attribute. The darkness beyond death, the rank of all forcibly used perks and skills will be upgraded, limits will be broken and your suffering shall be a blessing. Forcibly using perks, Devourer, transcendent sense, you stare with courage in the face of death with the courage, the hotness and burns of a volcano cannot stop you. You have gained a new perk, heat resistance, S, you are resistant to heat to a certain degree. You have a 10% chance to resist burn damages. Your will and desire to grow stronger, devouring everything that blocks your path. You have gained a new skill, lava ration, A, when the skill is activated anything you touch, living or non-living, will slowly turn to lava and reduce to molten magma. You can turn a part of your skin to molten magma, charging that part of your body with 1800-2100 defense and a 5% chance of damage reflection. Your senses tear at the horror of seeing the pathway to your death but not being able to do anything. The feeling of helplessness erodes your senses, powerlessness plaques you, but your mind is fortified. If death is the path, then I shall follow. Skill. Transcendent sense has been upgraded. R.Rank S. Rank, Transcendent sense, S, you can sense killing intent from any direction and see the pathway of attacks 20 seconds before. You have passed the second trial of death, you have gained 100 stat points, you have gained a new title, I do not fear death. New stat, will, has been added due to the title effect. The more your bravery and courage, the higher your will stats become. This stat cannot be increased by adding a stat point. You have touched the darkness beyond death, the darkness will begin to consume you, there is no turning back. It will only get harder from here on. A new attribute has been created, Shadow Lord, locked. Chapter 34 The Celestial Code. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The endless streams of messages appeared in front of Wraith as he flared up from the bed. What? He ran his hands through his body but there were no burns. What is going on? Wraith beseeched the vertical lines of holographic tabs that appeared in front of him. His eyeballs dilated as he read from the least to the top, then. Status, Hero Status, Name. Unknown Class. Child of Death Age. 001 Aura Points. 00 Mana Points. 00 Shadow Energy, Locked. 01 Title. Celestia Slayer, one who devours death, chosen by the claws of failure, destined for damnation. I do not fear death. Traits. The darkness beyond death, the dissatisfaction failure brings, Shadow Lord, locked, perks. Devourer, EX. Transcendent Sense, S. Intimidation, S. Heat Resistance, S. Skill. Truth Seeker, S. Lava Ration, A. Stat, Strength. 4 Agility. 8 Vitality. 20 Intelligence. 130 Endurance. 79 Will. 10 Available stat points. 100 A new skill, one that is very useful. And I have 4 perks. And a new attribute too. Even though it's locked, it sounds so cool. Shadow Lord Wraith grinned hard and was about to continue his jolly moment until he stole a glance to his side and found Volmak collapsed on a shattered concrete. He flew off the bed. Old man! Old man! He shouted as he pulled the old man up, but with Volmak's weight, he couldn't even lift. After struggling for 5 more seconds, Wraith opened his stats with glittering face as if he was about to spend money recklessly. 30 points have been added to strength stat, 30 points have been added to agility stat, a perfect ratio synergy has been created between strength and agility stat. Wow! The perfect ratio synergy, a state where the amount of speed and strength is equal or almost equal, hence generating greater attack power even without a weapon. Some heroes can smash tough weapons and shields with their fists with the perfect and precise utilization of this synergy. 20 stats point has been added to vitality strength, let's save up the rest for emergencies. A fresh and subtle blue breeze flowed around his body and he could feel it from within, a surreal feel of the changes that were happening rapidly in his body as he lifted the old man with much ease compared to before. With both hands he placed the man's broad arms on his shoulders and moved him to the bed. Then stretched his back after dropping him rashly. Okay. He paused for a while, exchanging glances between the shattered concrete and the man on the bed. What could have happened? Last time too it was like that. He sat on the chair opposite the bed and leaned backward, resting his head and looking at the roof. Still, the abyss played me again. Should I call this a test of courage, or did things change at some point? He mumbled as his eyes slowly began to close again. He couldn't control it, he just seemed to not always learn. No matter how much he wanted to resist sleep, he was powerless before it. "Thank you so much," Volmak muttered as he dropped the bowl of water he had just consumed. With very tired eyes he stood from the bed but fell back to his butt as he still couldn't get his head straight. Wraith delicately stood beside him, trying to help in the brief moment of staggering. "But I don't understand. What happened? Why did you pass out on the ground? That time before too you seem to have knelt for a very long time." "Ha!" Volmak sank his face into his palm. "His dust has gotten stronger. No doubt this is the same feeling that forced me to my knees, only that it is a tiny bit and isn't intimidating." The man raised his head. "I supposed you go to the abyss every time you sleep." Wraith sat on the chair in front of Volmak and dragged it closer. "Yes, then I am given a trial. When I pass the trial I am rewarded. If I fail I will have to retake the trial and it will be harder than before. At least from my observation so far." Wow! Volmak rubbed the lower lips of his opened mouth. "All that combined with the ability to resurrect after death. It sounds like the abyss is cooking up something. I have never heard of something like this. If not that I experienced it, even I wouldn't believe it if I was told. But I am confused. First I thought it was Fel doing all this. After all, I was chosen by Fel. No, there is a lot to this. Listen well, there are some informations that we cannot perceive or understand because of the celestial code. But I will start by telling you this even if it has consequences. I believe you should know. Fel is an archdemon." "Ha!" A stinging pain stroked through Wraith's head as he heard. Rolling his eyes up he was about to faint but jacked back to reality by sheer force. "Your will stat has increased by 1, Volmak's eyeball thinned in. Did he just resist the penalty as if it is nothing? When secrets of cosmology are revealed, especially of primordials and celestial, our mind is temporarily kicked out of the plane of existence so we can forget, or better still find it hard to remember. You are telling me he just resisted that like he was resisting sleep?" Volmak's mouth wouldn't close. "Ah. So you mean, Fel is not an archon?" The same pain stroked through his head as he heard those words, but it was manageable this time. "To be particular, Fel is an archdemon, the first and only archdemon to enter the celestial plane." Bim! It struck him again, his head fell backward and his eyeballs completely disappeared, but after 3 seconds he jacked his head forward again. "Your will stat has increased by 1, Volmak was about to die of shocks and surprises. You are bleeding." He pointed at Wraith's nose. Wraith roughly cleaned the blood as he dealt with the leftover of stinging pain in his head. "Even if he can resist it, it is still dangerous to keep on telling him. I can't tell you much, it will affect you, and even I don't know what happened after Fel entered the celestial plane. But a lot of things must have changed if he is perceived as an archon in your world." Gbim! The pain struck him again, and this time he completely gave out, foaming through his mouth and bleeding through his nose and ears. "Ah, I overdid it." Chapter 35 The Old Man Volmak. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "Man, that penalty is fucking hard to deal with." Wraith sighed as drops of blood fell on the ground. Even merely thinking about what Volmak said inflicted pain in his head. "Have you been thinking about it again?" Volmak said as he walked outside, towards Wraith who was cleaning the blood off his nose with his hand. "Haha, I just can't resist it. The thought that all I have believed in from my childhood might be a lie." He stood up from the wooden table. "How can I not be affected by celestial code?" "The only way you cannot be affected by it, huh?" "I don't know, no one has ever talked about it." "How come you are not affected by it?" "I don't know that too. What I do know is that a demon of 981 years old would still be able to bear some certain level of information. Besides, I was told by someone who has completely broke free from the code. Maybe all that added to the reason why I can freely say it. But it will be worse for a human. Damn, looks like it is so uncool being a human. 980.1. Damn. Wraith's mind suddenly drifted through his status. Hero status, name. Unknown class. Child of Death age. 001 aura points. 00 mana points. 00 shadow energy, locked. 01 title. Celestia Slayer, one who devours death, chosen by the claws of failure, destined for damnation, I do not fear death. Traits. The darkness beyond death, the dissatisfaction failure brings, Shadow Lord, locked, perks. Devourer, EX. Transcendent Sense, S. Intimidation, S. Heat Resistance, S. Skill. Truth Seeker, S. Lava Ration, A. Stat, Strength. 34 Agility. 38 Vitality. 40 Intelligence. 130 Endurance. 79 Will. 12 available stat points. 20 Right, my age is a triple digit and 1. It doesn't make sense except if my age is being counted according to how long I've spent in Felfium, does that mean I have the probability to live hundreds of years even though I am human? Wraith rubbed his chin and asked Volmac, who was already busy cutting the woods he had brought from earlier. I don't know if people in your world can hear the voice of the world and see written words in front of your eyes. You mean the cosmotic system? The man replied to him and slashed a small piece of wood into 4 different parts with one swing. Wraith glanced at the skillfulness but quickly returned to his conversation. I don't understand, why is everything different? So let's say this cosmotic system. What color is it? The man picked another chopped wood. Golden, of course. Wait, golden. Mine is black, but even others from the rut is blue. Are they fake too? Wraith wondered. What is it? Volmac turned to him after slashing down another chop into 3 parts. The section that is supposed to display my name changed, everything changed when I entered this world, and the part that is supposed to show my name is saying unknown, then it means the cosmotic system does not know your name. Which is very weird and impossible. Right. Weird, and my age is 1 and the skill ranks and other kinds of stuff changed too. The old man stared at Wraith blankly, at Wraith, who after a few seconds understood what that meant. I need to get rid of this damn celestial code, he grumbled and walked inside while the man continued to slash down chops of wood. After he was done, he packed the chopped wood together, packed it into a sack, and put it on his shoulder, bid Wraith farewell and went into the city to sell the woods. Wraith, on the hand, had endlessly stared at the man for hours and as a result discovered some things that left him so dazed that he didn't know that Volmac had gone and also bid him farewell. You are using skill, Truth Seeker, skill use does not require magical energy, target status, name. Volmac, true name. You do not have the authority to view this information yet, class. The undefeated general age. 0981 fiendish energy. 7000/7000 title. Conqueror, a man of mighty valor. Traits. Discipline of the Act Z. Perks. Azure breathing technique. Blessed by Shax, skill. Blazing obliteration strike, UR. Tiger clawed fist, E. Black wind palm strike. 2 wind strike, D. Black wind palm strike. 4 wind strike, C. Black wind palm strike. 6 wind strike, C. Black wind palm strike. 8 wind strike, B. Black wind palm strike. 16 wind strike, B. Black wind palm strike. 30.2 wind strike, A. Black wind palm strike. 60.4 wind strike, R. Black wind palm strike. 1.20.8 wind strike, S. Mist dance sword strike, G. Kick of the mountain crane, F. Black sword art. Black Moon, SSR. Black Sword Art. Moonlight, SR. Ethereal Hellion Body Strengthening, A. Spinning Cut Chain Strikes, A. Flame Wall, B. Dragon Claw Punch, A. Poison Arts, D. Rising Star Kick, A. Blood Reversal Technique, C. Meridian Resonance, D. Ghost Steps, S. Black Sword Art. Reflect, S. Black Sword Art. Stab, A. Black Sword Art. Eclipse, SR. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. First Heaven, Descending Dragon, A. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Second Heaven, Severing Sword, R. Withering Fist, B. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Third Heaven, Thunderbolt, A. Black Moon Spiritual Sense Attack, S. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Fourth Heaven, Heaven Destroying Wheels, R. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Fifth Heaven, Heavenly Sword Cleave, A. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Sixth Heaven, Radiant Strike, S. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Seventh Heaven, Whirlwind, S. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Eighth Heaven, Heaven's Gate Formation, S. 9 Heavens Destruction Techniques. Ninth Heaven, Heaven Explosive Extermination, SR. Soul Shattering Sword Thrust, A. Thousand Sage Flash Sword, R. Bloodburst Flash, D. Thunder Step, C. Stats, Strength. 283 Agility. 106 Vitality. 750 Wisdom. 422 Will. 99 Dexterity. 910 What in the world is this monster? Wraith felt his nerves shiver as he gulped at the long list of skills that was revealed before him. No wonder Absalom or whatever his name is was so humble in front of him. I have never seen anyone with so many skills. He could defeat anyone in the rut. Wraith continued to glare into the status before him and didn't know when a drop of sweat fell off the side of his head. He couldn't help but wonder how strong the demons would be if they were the ones that defeated Volmac when he was challenging them. The thought of it exhilarated him but also scared him, but the more important thing was his motivation to get stronger, still couldn't take his eyes off his list. The abyss has resonated with your desires. Chapter 36 The Disaster I Spoke of. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wraith was overwhelmed once more. What is it again this time? The abyss has resonated with your desires. You are not qualified for the third trial of death. Show your worth, gain the qualifications. The abyss is watching. The message disappeared with this but left Wraith even more confused than before. Proof my worth. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? I jumped into a volcano, isn't that enough for you? Wraith's complaints disappeared into the cold wind. He sat cross-legged and looked into the clear white sky. It has been frustrating. But it has been progressive. And as I said, if walking this path is how I will gain the power I need, then I won't dread it. He nodded and lowered his head with a smile, then went inside afterward. It has been 1 month since Epsilon City was declared a danger zone and all citizens were evacuated. Epsilon City was separated from the rest of the nation by sea, but nearer to Shuren Malong State, where is said to be the private residence of a certain retired hero, who refused to evacuate even when he was shown the dangers that lurked in the dungeon. Maybe it was his pride or confidence, who knows, but no one could dare say otherwise because this man Yao Jansi is a legend, although now old and withering in his mansion, but his legacy and achievements have never been able to be washed away by incoming heroes. Some heroes have also done greater things such as hunting down tier 9 field monsters on their own or defeating some well-known strong monsters such as drakes. But this was different. There was a large difference between field monsters and dungeons monsters. Why? Because of the cosmotic energy that dungeon monsters are exposed to. All things comprise of energy, but that basis, foundation, and beginning of all energy is the cosmotic energy which can only be rivaled by. Dungeons are cosmology-driven, one that always occurs regardless of which universe, except for universes that have an overwhelming influence of the cosmos, such as the primordial and celestial realms. Because dungeons are cosmology-driven, the monsters are exposed to a great amount of cosmos energy. This energy does not only make them stronger but creates in them a core, giving them the capability of quick adaptation and rapid evolution, which meant that the difficult the dungeon, the more of a threat they are to not just humanity but other forms of existence. Which was why their danger levels were classified between level 1 level 10. Level 10 dungeons are a very rare occurrence and have only appeared twice, and one of those twice was cleared by the white hero Yao Jansi alongside notable heroes from different nations such as Delegado Lambert, Alan Mordeus, Paldina the Grey Empress, and several other legendary heroes who were slowly being replaced by their offspring. This was an occurrence 40 years ago when Yao Jansi was ending his prime. Now he is just a 90-something man living his life amidst the thick forest of Shuren Malong states. Apart from that time, over a month ago was another time that a level 10 dungeon would appear and be distributed all over the world. Nigeria was lucky they only had to deal with one. The news reports show that half of Nelgal nation has been brought to a ravaging disaster because of the outbreak of 2 level 10 dungeons. Although the heroes did their best, in the end, they were just another country that was lacking in strength, in fact, consider the weakest, and going forward might have to close down the entire country. As a matter of fact, people were already migrating. Of course, the surging appearance of dungeons meant more resources, but that is if they can clear these dungeons. Yao Jansi was seated in the open yard of his house, reading the newspaper which reported the current state of Nelgal and what the Pomei Empire and other nations are proposing towards helping weak nations that couldn't handle this sudden change. How selfish, using desperate times like this to exploit nations. TSK, he clicked his tongue and sipped the cup of tea that was placed beside him. Wearing a white robe and a beach-themed short. The hairline of his white hair on both the right and left side had shifted inwards, leaving only the center in front. His hair was shoulder-length and its whiteness was almost sparkling under the serene sun. He flipped to the next page and continued, but came to an abrupt stop with his eyeballs thinning in as a heavy thud struck his heart. What is this? Monsters. As he stood up, his black eyeballs turned white and began to exude white smoky energy. How in the world? I thought they said these monsters won't be able to cross the sea since they are ants and can't fly. He muttered to himself, remembering the conversation between him and the Nigeria Heroes Association president, who had come to tell him that even though the monsters were ant-type, it would still be best and safe for him to evacuate because his residence was very close to Epsilon City, but he blatantly refused. He did conquer a level 10 dungeon after all. You arrogant monsters! He yelled, and in that instance a tremendous pillar of light stroked down upon him, arming him with white armor, almost making him look like the Jade Emperor in battle mode. A swarm of black ants covered the sky above him, instantly turning the bright day to night, and there the battle began. President! President! The drone camera in Epsilon has captured footage of an outbreak. One of the agents ran into the president's office with a smart tablet in his hand. Ha! Is that what this uncomfortable feeling is? He collected the tablet and began to watch it. Moments later the hand that held the tablet began to shake, with his brows furrowed and his eyes slowly turning from brown to blue. This is how recent? 1 week ago. As at when we and the Blueslian Guild, and several other guilds went inside, the monsters did not have wings. Are you telling me those monsters evolved in just 2 weeks? They adapted to their surrounding and evolved in order to cross the limitations it presented them. I think that is exactly how this is too. In Nelgal, the monsters there are supposed to be water-type and not be able to survive on land. They suddenly began to come out of the water, and their tails became legs, their fins became a fist. I think this is really how powerful a level 10 dungeon monster is. Ah! The association president dropped the tablet and sank into his seat. Then we should be worried about something. What is that? While we were in the dungeon, the ants were dragging away dead bodies of heroes that fell. Yes, the Blue Eslian also reported the same thing, that they were unable to retrieve the body of their assistant guild president who died protecting the entire party. Yes. Thanks to him a lot of people were able to survive and leave the dungeon. Those monsters' strength is in their numbers, no matter how many we killed they just kept coming and coming. And were even intelligent enough to learn from repeated battles. Sir, will Yao Jianxi be safe? The association president instantly flung to his feet. That is right. Send a drone there right now. If possible, send a rescue chopper too. He shouted with perspiration breaking out of his forehead. Oh shit, Sir Yao, I hope you have not been taken by them. Every of Yao's strikes was explosive and killed hundreds of ants in one go. However, there was no end to them, they kept coming. Wham! With a shining spear in his hand, Yao dealt hundreds of light spear projections into the sky of flying ants, finally causing light to leak into the atmosphere. He staggered for a bit. Did my body wear out from using one skill? As the ray of light fell on him, he felt his strength return and stood back up and continued to swivel the spear around himself, shattering the ants that flew towards him as he walked forward. The minute he stepped away from the ray of sunlight that broke in from the swarming ants, he staggered forward, and in that instant a metallic red hand with 3 long claws plunged into his chest. Hike! He vomited blood as he suddenly remembered something that he never should have forgotten, but old age has its consequences. Sunlight. The ants swarmed over the open space, closing the little rays of sunlight that escaped through just as if they knew that he was invincible under the sun. The red hand grabbed his head and flung him with a twirl, his body smashed his way into the woods and tumbled on the ground ceaselessly. As he was nearing his stopping point, the red figure appeared behind him and spiraled a kick at him, smashing him into the tree opposite him. The tall red humanoid ant with white compound eyes and extra 2 pairs of hands that folded into his body, leaving only 1 pair of hands. Looking like a result of the mixed breeding of humans and ants, he slowly walked towards the man who was covered in blood and was gasping for his breath as the terrifying monster grabbed his neck and lifted him. Whish! With a swing of his claws, Yao's head went flying off. The monster dropped the body and walked away while the ground ants who were almost 4 foot tall dragged the man's corpse. Chapter 37 Emergency Trial. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wraith lazily lay on the table with eyes to the sky and hands on his chest, slowly tapping a beat to his ears while he dealt with the unbearable boredom that he has been managing for 4 months now. It's been 8 months since he entered Felfium, 4 months spent in the abyss, and the remaining 4 he was currently spending. What bothered him the most was that the abyss, for good 4 months after telling him to show his worth, has not said anything. How was he supposed to prove his worth? Well, he did pick a new wood chopping skill thanks to his tendency to devour. Even old man Volmak couldn't measure up to him when it comes to chopping wood. His chopping accuracy was so neat that the wood had no rough patterns. He was able to split this single wood into 8 different parts with just 1. Over the months he had learned the real use of the perk, Devourer, and he was seeing the potential of the skill to become his greatest trump card. There are other things he had been able to learn too. Especially information regarding the races that existed in Felfium. The lowest on the ranking of races were the lower fiends such as hellhounds, Akairai, wingless birds, Bogast, shape changers, night hags, nightmares, and many others, but of low intelligence and could be likened unto animals because of their level of intelligence. Even though some of them could pose real threats when used by an intelligent life form. Then we have the Lemura, who are fiends without a physical body. They are like wraiths and ghosts and can possess any item or creature for an extensive period. AKTZ fiends have physical bodies although ranging in types and are mostly without wings. Yugalas have 2 sub-races which are incubus/succubus and vampires, although the 2 look almost alike but are 2 different races and have nothing in common. The Tanas are a race of fiends with explosive defensive ability and are mostly always built like a minotaur in several ways, of course, as there is no stereotypical formation to the constitution of a fiend's body. The Abrinths are the second strongest race and part of which the Dark Elves are grouped with because of their likelihood. Abrinths are an external race who were accepted by the Abyss I.E. just like Wraith, the door appeared to them when they had nowhere else to go. The demons, the primal and first existence of Felfium, and the strongest race. They have no subrace, however, are the only fiend who are capable of evolution. When a demon is born, he starts from the lowest level of evolution, lesser demon, greater demon, archdemon. Except for rare cases where both parents are powerful demons of the highest evolution, the offspring may naturally be born as a greater demon but never an archdemon. This old man, thanks to me, is making more money, but he never takes me to the city. It's been 4 months and I have never seen the city, not even once. Wraith flung up and crossed his legs, looking for an excuse to enter the city. That was when it happened. The air afar off suddenly got violent and began to blow like a whirlwind, but at a stagnant point. Wraith, who was getting consumed in the confusion of what was happening before him, suddenly heard a mechanical beep. A dungeon has appeared. The Abyss has presented you with an emergency trial of worth. Kill 50 monsters in the dungeon, kill 100 monsters in the dungeon, kill 200 monsters in the dungeon, kill 500 monsters in the dungeon, kill all the monsters in the dungeon, kill the dungeon owner. Your worth would be proven according to which of the trial you complete, Before Wraith could take his next breath, the whirlwind suddenly sucked him into a massive blue portal that broke out of space. The news of Yao Jansi's passing broke not just the country but the entire world. At this point unrest began to rise. L.RG If Yao Jansi can lose his life to monsters, we can definitely die too. What are the heroes doing? You are supposed to be our protectors. Perhaps it is time to wake the Archons. We call for protection. The country is responsible for us normal citizens. Using their weakness as an eligible reason to be answered and protected, the citizens of Nigeria began to protest around different parts of the nation and demanded that the country take care of the dungeon as fast as they can before things get bad and they become the second country that is turned to ruins because of a level 10 dungeon. But no matter how hard they protested, the hands of the government were tied. Perhaps it was to protect their selfish pockets. The only country willing to help them for a reasonable amount of money after seeing what happened to Yao Jansi was Pomei Empire, but even though they were preparing to raid the last level 10 dungeon that appeared in their city, has learned a big lesson from the first two. The Imperium issued an order for both the Guild and the Imperial Association of Heroes to work together. Lehman City was filled with heroes and from an aerial view was like a swarm of protests. Different heroes and guilds were all in their armor and with their guild flags raised in the air, with the strongest hunters at the forefront of the crowd and closer to the red portal that swirled endlessly. I see even you are here. A tall jet-black-haired young man with a skinny face said to the lady that just came out of the crowd and stood beside him with her hands folded and her eyes fixated on the portal in front of them. She turned her face. Ah, if it isn't the prominent black swordsman, she said with a short chuckle and turned her face to the portal. Somehow, her short greeting was the most displeasing thing Curtis has heard today, and for some reason, it annoyed him. But he wouldn't want to make a scene in this setting. He had the dignity of his family to uphold since his younger brother had crashed it to the ground. Besides, he wouldn't dare to a level O hunter. He brushed his hands through his shoulder-length hair and exhaled. What is this? Now that I have seen his brother, his face looks so regular. I guess he got all the goodness of his family and its ugliness too. Even though Amber Rose Mordeus' attention was fixated on the portal, something else occupied her mind. Ever since her encounter with Wraith, she had always felt restless and worried about the way she responded, concerned about how society would treat him. She had asked around several times and was able to eventually get his residence, but he was not around. She went twice again for 1 month, but couldn't meet him, and her visit was beginning to get suspicious to the eyes of the slums, so she stopped. But she still wouldn't be able to get her mind off him sometimes. Was it pity? She couldn't answer the question, but she could only relate it to the feeling of pity. That he did seem like a good man though. I wonder where he has been. She heaved a last sigh as she refocused her gaze on the take ahead of her. Wraith or anything won't matter if I don't survive this dungeon. She tightened her grip and adjusted the golden breastplate of her armor, sizing her breast perfectly into it as they got ready for the raid. Chapter 38 Dungeon Raid 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wraith was met with dry land, with dried up tries that have been rid of life. Darkness and the serene cold that crawled into Wraith's skin were what the environment made the most of itself. The silence was enticing, could almost be mistaken for a safe space. But no, activating Transcendent Sense, thanks to the new upgrade of Wraith's perk, he could feel the distant glare, those murderous auras that shot at him like a knife, making his gut itch. Dungeon information. This dungeon is the habitat of black panthers. They are four-legged ferocious beasts that tear anything in their path. Dungeon rank. C, according to Felfium ranking. Dungeon rank. Level 4, according to the Rut ranking. It was getting clear and clear that the ranking in the Rut was inferior to that of Felfium. For example, what would be likened to a rank C dungeon according to the Rut ranking is level 5. Rank G level 1, rank F level 2, rank D level 3, rank C level 4, rank B level 5, rank A level 6, rank R level 7, rank S level 8, rank SR level 9, rank SSR level 10, rank SS and rank SSS. The two last ranks did not have an equivalent in the Rut, which meant there were stronger dungeons in Felfium than in the Rut, but it is expected since Felfium was sitting directly on one of the planes of cosmology and the Rut was just around it. Wraith again was met unprepared. No weapon, the only thing he could depend on was his skill, lava ration. He nodded slowly. It should be enough to handle them, with lurking beasts around him. He couldn't dare to give thought to any other thing. But he was deeply worried about the presence of a dungeon in Felfium. Since he had not completely understood the construction of the world. And trying to seek out knowledge about it would take a toll on him. He had to somehow connect the dot to the detriment of not knowing if he is right or wrong. Wraith cocked his head left and right, stretching his muscles as he walked forward, tightening his fist and squeezing his eyes to a slit as he took off. Thwack, surely his speed had increased explosively, his image blurred through the distance between him and an ominous black tree that was 20 meters ahead of him. Fu not wasting a second as he reached the tree, he pulled back his punch, letting out a steamy breath that served as a force control as he blasted his punch through the tree. He didn't even need to say the word, barely expecting what should happen was enough to activate the skill. Activating lava ration, skill activation failed. You do not have any energy points. Skills can be activated using either magic energy, aura energy, or shadow energy. Your shadow energy is locked due to the locked attribute, Shadow Lord. How could I forget the fundamentals? Reaware. From above the panther pounced, activating Transcendent Sense. The panther's actions suddenly got slower and a red marking flew from its jaw to Wraith's shoulder. Wraith, who was already tilting left, would have put his shoulder right into the jaw of the panther. He shifted rightward, going in the opposite direction and rolling on the ground as the panther landed and gnarled at him. Several other panthers began to pounce down from the dead trees while some emerged from behind. They had carefully hidden themselves, waiting for a perfect moment of ambush. Wraith was surrounded by 7 panthers and several more stared down from the branches of the trees with glowing white eyes. Pomei Empire. They could be mistaken for the strongest nation in the Rut because of their military strength and their rule of monarchy. They are the only country that goes strictly with that rule, and since ages of the dawning of the Rut have always lived by it. Another reason as to why they are strong was their overly cautious nature, and the impressive training that they give heroes regardless of the archon they are from. In Pomei Empire all of them are one. This is what gave everyone overwhelming confidence in clearing this dungeon. It was a level 10 dungeon and tens of scouts had died trying to figure out the length and breadth of the dungeon, and what kind of monsters are inside to formulate the best possible strategies of attack that will work and prevent too many losses of men. Regardless of what they were going in there to meet, the faces of the heroes were stiff and brazen with the ambience of courage. Several heroes showed a little nervousness here and there. But let's take a look at the soldiers. In golden armor and a red tabard with a golden coffin-shaped shield engraved on the shield was a golden red cross on a red background. The array of the army was in rows and columns stretching down one side of the road, and the glittering of their armor set them apart from every other hero. This army wasn't necessarily full of heroes. Heroes or not, they were men that have trained to support their limit, and leading those men himself, Andres Eugene Pamilion, younger brother of the emperor, his red hair flaring up as if it wants to catch the wind. And Gus brought round eyes like a flame set to burn its enemy to the ground. His only fault was his frequent glances with gritting teeth toward where Amber Rose stood. "Your Highness." "Focus," the tall, white-bearded man behind him whispered, and he immediately returned to order as they began to march into the portal after everything was clear. As the leader of today's battle, Prince Andres was the first to march into the dungeon. Behind and beside him were prominent heroes such as the Empire's General Colin Asbury himself, Leif Outerward, Ethan O'Brien, Brandon Lee, Chachi Banks, Fiona Graham, Amber Rose Mordeus and Curtis Delgado. The dungeon, as they had already known and expected, was a widespread land of caves, although there were trees, but according to the scout whose deaths were not in vain. The monster that existed in this dungeon was a cave animal. Andres looked up into the sky. It's rare to see dungeons have a moon. And it's a full moon. Creatures of the night that gain immense power under the influence of the full moon. This entire environment is meant to favor them. Ethan O'Brien, a level A hero of the Justice Archon, said as he strapped his large and thick, muscled hand with gauntlets. "That is why they are dungeon." "Your Highness, what will we do?" Leif Outerward, with purple-colored spiked hair and thin eyes, bowed to the prince. "We have come here to play a game of numbers. They are monsters, this whole place is built to favor them, so we'll at least shift a little favor to our side too. Going into the cave will not give us the privilege to fight with numbers, and we are liable to be ambushed. No, we will definitely be ambushed. So, we will blow up the cave, disturb it until they can't stand it anymore, and the moment they start to pour out." The prince paused as he glared toward the mountain cave ahead of them. His eyes glittered as his brows lowered and tightened. It will be an all-out war. Chapter 39 Dungeon Raid 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Perks and skills are two diverse things. However, perks can be seen as skills that do not need energy to be activated, skills that are more or less the hero's own sense. This is why a lot of heroes yearn for perks, although the importance of skill cannot be watered down by perks. These two are meant to work hand in hand, one passively with or without consent while the other actively, with consent. And all these fundamentals were what Wraith was taught while preparing for his trial of the Archons. But how could he forget including the fact that there is a reason why heroes aim to go to dungeons more than hunt in fields? And that reason is monster cores and magic crystals. Magic crystals are minerals that mutate after their exposure to cosmotic energy, and just like the tier of ranks of dungeons, their grade is also in that increasing order. Their uses are endless, especially when it comes to crafting items. Monster cores, however, are a bit more different story. They also can be used to craft items. In fact, such items would be incredibly strong compared to when crafted with magic crystals. But the reason why heroes don't use cores to craft a lot is because they can be used to increase one's dust energy. If dust energy was what was likened to magic energy in Felfium, then maybe all I need to do is absorb a core. Wraith rolled away, barely dodging the black sharp claws of the panther. He picked himself up quickly and made a run for it. "I have to absorb a monster core. I 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 have to absorb a monster core," was all that crowded his mind as he ran, cutting left and right to avoid panthers that jumped down from the trees or suddenly leaped towards him from his left or right when he wasn't looking. It was impressive that he was able to outrun monsters who are speed-based. But no matter how far he kept going, he wasn't going to absorb a core by running away from the monsters behind him. And he knew there was a bigger problem: the abyss is watching. The feeling of being laughed at haunted him, and he suddenly made a U-turn, lunging his fist into the monster that leaped at him, simultaneously increasing his stat. 10 points have been added to strength stat. The impact of the blow created a loud impact that caused the other panthers to pause as that one flew backward, toppling on the ground. Activating intimidation. All monsters towards you will be cautious of your strength. I guess it hasn't reached the fear level yet. The panthers that were lunging at him like love at first sight just a moment ago suddenly were circling him with an intense glare. The red patterns of their attack kept changing every time they moved. He could tell they were being extremely cautious. More like they didn't want to end up with their pal there whose belly was already glittering. The moment monsters inside dungeons die, their cores began to rise to the surface, like the energy is trying to escape, but it just makes it easy for extraction. And right now the only thing that was on Raven Wraith's head was how to cross this monster and reach that glittering thing. Although he must admit that he was amazed at how much power he was able to pull there, he never imagined it going that way, and definitely did not know the panther would die from one punch. But it was pure coincidence. For a brief moment the synergy clicked the moment he redirected all the force of his speed and threw a punch, and to top it, added more strength stat points to a flying punch. He was bound to see an extraordinary result. Aish, damn it! He shouted and ran forward regardless. While the panthers in front of him jumped out of the way by impulse, the ones behind him leaped at him. This particularly arrogant one seemed to be an excellent and extraordinary jumper. His figure was already above Wraith, who put more speed to his legs. He rolled over to where the dead panther lay, barely avoiding the claws of the great jumper. He looked down at the dead monster and looked at the jumper, who snarled at him and looked at the dead monster too. Wraith used both hands to tear the part that was glittering. His hand couldn't tear it much, but a little was enough for the white core to slip out. Wraith immediately grabbed it and moved back, being cautious of the monsters too, who looked like they were trying to figure out what he just took from their dead brother. And they were beginning to look angrier than before. With wrinkles all over their nose and their sharp teeth clapping together. You have obtained a white monster core. Do you want to absorb the core Y/N? Wraith smiled. Yes, absorbing core. Beov Wraith could feel the warmth enter his body as his hands began to release black sparks that flew around the core, and the next it was gone. You have absorbed monster core, digesting energy, separating energy, magic energy/dust energy/fiendish energy/cosmotic energy. You have a body that is compatible with cosmotic energy, digesting cosmotic energy. Magic energy has upgraded to cosmotic energy. You have gained 10 cosmotic energy. Oh wow. Wraith was puzzled. Cosmotic energy is a composition of all energy. It is the great source which others are branched out from. So, when a core is absorbed, the energies are separated and only the one needed by the hero is digested, the rest is released into the atmosphere by diffusion through the skin pores. It was already enough mystery that he kept seeing magic energy and has never seen dust energy on his status, but now having a body compatible with cosmotic energy. He was a tad away from saying, "What the hell am I?" The monsters in front of him were running out of patience. He grinned and smacked his hands together as he could feel it in his bones, in his blood vessels, his muscles. The energy was overflowing everywhere, and it was a new dimension of strength he had never tasted. It was after all the first time he was going to truly use his skills. He lunged towards the monster, and in response, the great jumper ran towards him, growling with wide open mouth, inviting Wraith to be his dinner. Activating skill Lavaration. Chapter 40 Dungeon Raid 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You have killed one black panther. The feeling was amazing. The monster began to melt with just one touch, and the only thing that was left of it was its core. The downside to this skill was that it leaves nothing of the carcasses of the monsters, but who cares? You have gained 10 cosmotic energy. Oh ho. Wraith's lips arched upward with his eyes slit. Come to me. You crazy bastards. Wraith sprung forward, running through the panthers. All he just needed to do was touch them long enough for the melt to start spreading, and even when there was an opening he didn't care about it because of the defense ability of the skill. It served as a great trapping scheme to conveniently melt the panther to magma. You have killed 10 monsters, you have gained +1 speed stat. The clear progress was a motivation to Wraith. But there were no monsters around anymore. You have gained plus 10 cosmotic energy, 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 you have gained plus 10 cosmotic energy. Wraith walked around the area collecting more cores before he went further into the wilderness of dead trees. Wow, I gained 1 speed stat, clenched his hands and stretched them to release his tensed muscles as he continued further. Since heroes were incapable of leveling up, their stats points are gotten 2 ways. During the process of absorbing cores, there's always a certain chance of again stats points, but they are fixated on certain stats. For example, Wraith being in a dungeon where the monsters are a speed type meant that when their cores are absorbed there are certain chances of getting speed stats. This is one of the reasons why heroes' stats are so diverse and unbalanced. The second way is update. After completing a series of quests issued by the Archon's Dust, players can go to their Archon's Temple and update their status. After the update, they are rewarded with stats and skills in the proportion to how well they complete these quests. Wraith didn't need to be told as he got there. They are stronger than those. He spread his fingers, exuding steam from his palm as he calculated their positions using transcendent sense. There are more. The panthers slowly crawled on the branches of the tree like lizards, with their tail wriggling over their head. The difference between them and the formers was their tail. You are using the skill, Truth Seeker, Monster Details, name. Paralytic Panther hit point. 1200/1200 offensive power. 400 defensive power. 250 trait. Their extra long tails have very strong muscles that will paralyze their opponent. Holy shit. Wraith smiled regardless of the information he saw. For a moment appeared to be mad. He just saw that he could get paralyzed and eaten by a set of paralytic black panthers and he responds to it with a smile. He rolled the sleeves of his coat which over the months had almost become one with his body. He flexed his hand and fingers sharpening his gaze on the panthers closer to him. Lavaration had one deadly flaw. The skill cannot simultaneously use its offensive and defensive side. It was impossible to turn the skin into a defensive wall of molten magma while trying to melt an enemy. It was a pick one, use one situation and it put Wraith in a bit of a situation where he didn't know what to do. So the fact that he was smiling was crazy. Come at me. And as if they understood his languages clearly the black beasts in their numbers leaped towards Wraith. You are using perk, Transcendent Sense, amazing. Truly amazing. Wraith danced through the horde of flying beasts in slow demo, like a ballet dancer and with a fluid that donned the tune of no music with rhythm and ecstasy as the dark skies of the night watched and poured its atmosphere upon this scene. Being able to see the threat of their attacks was magnificent. This skill is worth $1 million. As if dancing through them like a Tai-Chi master was not enough, he took the in-between moments to touch each of them, reducing them to lavas that oozed the ground with flames and smoke. In a jiffy Wraith had done away with 6 panthers and had gotten closer to the rest of the horde that slowly moved their legs in reverse. Was intimidation playing out again? This was just the sense of a beast that recognizes its superior. Even a rat would run away from a cat, wouldn't it? A death glare from Wraith's eyes darted through the panther. They suddenly made a U-turn and picked up the pace. Was the skill in too much effect? Congratulations, the darkness in you has risen, you have gained 10 shadow energy. Right, Wraith couldn't deny the lingering emotion of emptiness and enjoyment as he slayed the panthers. It started as a kind of determination when he killed the first panther, but it was feeling different, like he was losing something and couldn't put his fingers around what it was exactly. Raven Wraith has always been one with a dark side, but this is strange. However strange it may be, he wasn't about to ruin the moment which a horde of monsters ran away from. I don't want them running though. How will I pass the trial if they do like that? Rare scratched his head as if he didn't enjoy the fact that they just did. Only that, they weren't exactly running from him. He paused and let his eyes stay on the ground as a shadow began to rise and fill the entire place. A shadow. It was thicker, and by the way, the night of the dungeon there was no light in the sky, no moon, no stars. The darkness was just bright enough for him to see. It makes no sense that a shadow would be on the ground. Flap, 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 flap. The next was the rushed flaps of the birds like they were urgently fleeing from something. You have encountered the owner of the dungeon, so fast. I thought heroes said the owner of the dungeon is always the last monster to show. Wraith had based his entire theory that had played in his head on how to clear this dungeon and complete the trial. In that theory, the boss was saved for the last because by then he would have gotten enough energy points. But right now, how will man handle this situation?